Okay, thanks Andrew, and welcome to Nottingham. I'm very delighted to be able to start off the presentations this morning. If I'd known there was going to be a Spice Girls and MELSIG theme, I'd have come in my tracksuit, and then when Andrew waves his red card at me because I'm going over time, at least that would have been linked. So we'll see how we get through this. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about some of the work we've been doing with videos and screencasting in the School of Life Sciences, primarily with our role in providing distance learning courses where we've been using recorded lectures extensively, but also started exploring other uses of video, and really show you how that's imposed itself onto the teaching I do for our campus-based courses in terms of the flipped classroom, and just finish off with some conclusions and future directions. So which courses are we talking about here? The distance learning courses we started in 2009 with the clinical genetics programme, and then in 2011 were awarded the contract to run infection sciences as well. And running courses for the NHS was a really, really steep learning curve because they operate on such tight timescales that universities just can't comprehend. I'm amazed we got it all through the university planning process, and to be honest, I'm not sure they'd let us do it that quickly again, but it was a really steep learning curve, but essentially threw us in at the deep end for a group of people who'd always been interested in technology-enhanced learning, but being provided with the contract to run these courses really gave us the kick that we needed to actually get this off the ground and running. The campus-based teaching that I'm involved with is another MSc course in molecular genetics and diagnostics, which I started in 2006 and still teach on heavily, and that's the course that's really been improved, I think, with some of the technology and the approaches that we've been using for the distance learning courses. So as I said, these courses ran on a very tight timescale from being awarded the contract to actually having students there for us. The whole idea was that these would be distance learning courses that students study alongside a work-based training scheme. The NHS handles all the recruitment for us, which has both positives and negatives associated with it. More importantly, we're talking about relatively small numbers of students at this point, which I think is an advantage when you're trying new approaches. You don't want to be doing this with 500 students in one go. So we are talking about cohorts of somewhere between 25 and 35 per year, which has made it a lot more achievable. To start off with, we ran these as blended courses, so the students came to us for some face-to-face teaching, which was then backed up with online provision in terms of recorded lecture material and case studies. We started off uploading our recorded material to Moodle, which we thought was great. We tested it in-house, it all worked perfectly well. Then we let it out into the wild, and I was deluged by emails from students saying, I can't see the course, I can't access this video, it's not letting me do it. So we had a lot of students that sadly ended up looking like this within their NHS departments. Part of the problem is that there's a huge amount of variability with these trainees. They have a study day a week, but some students are told they have to be in the department. Some are told they can come in, but they can be in the library, and some are allowed to work from home. So the ones working from home had absolutely no problems whatsoever. All the ones working in an NHS environment hit this issue of NHS firewalls being blocked from YouTube and sometimes being blocked from our VLE. On a more pragmatic approach, these trainees are working in a diagnostic clinical environment. They're training to be clinical scientists in the laboratory. So actually just having access for a PC for long enough to sit down and do a protracted period of study for some of these trainees was really difficult. So despite all our best laid plans in the tender about how we were going to deliver this wonderful educational experience, as I said, some of our trainees ended up looking like that. So how did we solve this? Well, essentially, we decided that we couldn't rely on the NHS infrastructure anymore, so we chose to provide this relatively small number of students with iPads. And I do appreciate that this perhaps wouldn't be possible for large undergraduate cohorts at the moment, although institutions are now talking about it, and I know some institutions are doing this, for example, with their medical courses. So all our students are provided with iPads, they're Wi-Fi enabled. We also chose to give them the iPads which do have the capability for 3G, although we don't pay for that contract, which was something that came up in the student evaluations. They were very disgruntled that we weren't paying for their 3G contracts every month, which we had to reply to somewhat politely. Providing these students with iPads allows us to then package these recorded lectures and additional learning material into iBooks, which provides the students with a really convenient package that they can download when they're on a good Wi-Fi connection, whether that's at home or in a coffee shop or wherever. It's certainly not in the NHS environment because they don't have access to it. but it allows them to then download the course material onto their iPads so that they can access this offline. They don't always have to be logging into Moodle to see their course material. So this solved a lot of problems. So they get a nice bookshelf here. They can package their iBooks into collections based on their different modules. This allows us to include our podcasts here. When we first started producing these podcasts, really based on a pragmatic reason that we had a lot of Mac users in the department, we started using podcast capture to package these recorded lecture materials with a front and back end trailer and also the university logo as a watermark all the way through to try and overcome fears that lecturers had about people stealing their intellectual property and their slides and uploading everything to YouTube. At least this way it's still packaged with our corporate identity. So we have our recorded lectures here, additional notes where necessary, and then we can also incorporate quizzes for self-assessment within the iBooks, which we can also do within Moodle, but for these students, because we know internet access is an issue, providing these quizzes within the iBooks allows them to do everything offline. So what have we learned? Well, essentially with the videos, there's a temptation to stick with what you know and stand in front of a computer or a lectern like this, record your lecture, and then just give it to the students. But certainly for these trainees, and I think for a lot of part-time or distance learners, that's just not appropriate, and we need to be looking at ways of doing things differently. Certainly the length of these lectures, these students don't have time to sit down and listen to an hour or an hour and a half lecture. And to be honest, even when you do that with students in the classroom, I'm really not sure how much of that actually sinks in. So we've chosen to try and keep these short, somewhere around 15 to 20 minutes maximum, although trying to convince lecturers that that's a good idea is a whole separate battle. And displaying the length of the video, something as simple as that within the iBook. Here's your podcast, and it's 15 minutes. So students look at it and go, actually, I can fit that in on the bus journey on the way into work, or I've got 20 minutes spare in my lunch hour, I can sit and listen to it there. Providing them with the information, which isn't difficult to do, but it just allows that greater engagement, we think. The iBooks have both pros and cons. For us, it's been a great way of delivering material to these students because we know they've got iPads. And as I said, it allows us to package these into packets that they can then download, and they don't have to have an internet connection to do it. Obviously, the main disadvantage of this is if we're rolling this out to other students, then we don't know whether they've got iPads or not, and then you're into the whole different ballgame of trying to find compatible formats, which I think is a separate session. You could do a whole session on that just on its own. We've also tried lots of different bits of software for the recording. As I said, we had a lot of Mac users when we started this project, so they were quite happy just to sit down with their Mac and use podcast capture straight away. This was software that was available on all Macs. Apparently with the last upgrade of Mac operating systems, though, and the new Macs that you get, podcast capture is now not automatically included, so that is causing us a few problems. We've also tried various different screen capture tools. The free ones, where you can record 5 to 15 minutes, are great, but there is that limitation, which, to be honest, for some lecturers would be an advantage, because if it cuts them off, then they have to stop. We wouldn't get 2-hour lecture recordings being sent to us. We've also tried things like Camtasia, which were great for the ease of use. It's got a plug-in, people are familiar with PowerPoint. All they have to do is click that button and it records it. The disadvantage, obviously, with things like Camtasia are the license costs, so we haven't rolled that out to everybody. We've actually ended up buying several copies of a piece of software called Debut Video Capture. I think the licenses for that are only about £20, so it's been one that's been relatively easy to roll out to people, and that's just a general screen capture tool, but with options for putting subtitles and watermarks. We haven't used anywhere near all of its capacity. It's just a general screen capture one, but it works really well. It's got nice shortcuts for starting and stopping, and quite frankly, for most people, that's all they need. So that's the screen capture that we've been doing in the lecture recordings. We've also been looking at using other uses of videos. Primarily in one of my modules, I've used it to create a module introduction to try and engage these distance learning students into feeling that there's actually a face at the end of these slides. All the other ones we've been doing have just been screencasts of PowerPoint slides, because, as I said, that's what people are familiar with, and we get them into that first and then hopefully start developing their creativity, which I'm hoping we're going to hear more about today. So I've used this to provide just a short introduction to the module, so students actually see the person that's delivering their module to them, and hopefully we increase that sense of community. I'd also love to use this for student videos. At the moment, the software that we're using for this is primarily, again, iPad-based, which is great for our students, but there is also now a desktop PC version, which is still in beta. I won't show you the link for time constraints, given that we are running over a little bit, but the software is called Touchcast. It's an app available on the iPhone or iPad, freely available, and will take recordings up to 15 minutes without having to buy the professional version. The main challenge in putting this slide together was finding 3 screenshots where I wasn't pulling some awful face. I think they're not too bad. They were the best of a bad lot, quite frankly. But Touchcast, I found, was a really useful app, and again, I haven't explored it anywhere near its full potential. It creates these videos, but they're not just static videos. You can interact with them, especially if students are watching it on a touch-sensitive screen, a tablet or a phone. So the way that I've used it here is quite static, but what I want to explore is getting students to use this and use this interactivity. So as you can see, it's a fairly standard video background. Thanks to Kirsty, I don't know where Kirsty's sitting, I went and borrowed their green screen and sat in their seminar room talking to myself for a morning, trying to get it right. There's a teleprompter auto cue thing as well, so you don't have to remember it all, which is great, makes you look far more professional. So this one I've used as quite static. This was quite a neutral background. The thing that really excited me from the point of students is that you can have the BBC newsroom as your backdrop. And I'd love to get students picking a recent research paper and presenting it to their colleagues, but in the style of a news report. You know, make them realise what's exciting about all the research that's going on out there, but actually making them realise they've got to talk about it in very different terms if they were presenting this to people who don't have a science background, which is what we're teaching. So as well as just the video and the exciting backgrounds you can choose from, you can be in the Grand Canyon as well, or the Hollywood sign behind you. You also get what are called these V-apps, or video apps, which are these more interactive bits. I've just used graphics here, but you can have a Twitter feed coming up where students can actually scroll through it at the same time the video is playing behind you. You can have an internet site, so you're talking about something and they can click on the internet browser, go and look at it whilst the video is still running. So it's only 15 minutes for the free version, but again, I think certainly for student presentations, that gives them more of a challenge. How do you fit the key information into their presentations? So I'd really like to explore that in much more detail. It's quite frankly having the time to do all this. So how does this work that we've been doing on our distance course relate to the campus-based teaching? Because this is one of the ways I try and sell interaction with these programs to my academic colleagues, is that it's not a waste of time. You're not just doing this for a distance learning course. You can use this in your campus-based teaching as well. Now, Andrew's already mentioned the flipped classroom. Essentially, this isn't really that different to things that we've been doing with students for a long time. We say, here's some papers, some preparatory reading to do before you come to the lecture. We know they never do it, but we still give it to them anyway. The way that I've been using it this time is to use some of these recorded lectures that I tell them to look at in advance, and then we have a way of testing whether they've understood that or not. And it enables us to use our rather limited timetabled sessions with these students for much more interactive teaching, rather than just me standing at the front and talking at them for an hour, which is usually what happens. And you can see them glaze over after about 20 minutes. You know it's not working, but academics still maintain that this is one of the best ways to teach. So I give them the recorded lectures via Moodle. I tell them that there'll be a quiz at the start of the next session, and then we use the remainder of the timetabled session to do much more interactive, application-based things. The thing I was finding in the exam is that particularly for postgraduate students, we shouldn't just be testing recall. We should be testing whether they can apply this knowledge to new situations and synthesise new understanding from it. And they just couldn't do that in the exam situations. But we weren't really teaching them how to do it in a classroom-based situation. We gave them the exercises as homework, but there was no real interaction to test that they were doing it. So I gave them the factual information with the recordings. I then used an app called Nearpod to test understanding. Again, this is free for up to 50 students logging in at one time. So for larger classes, you'd need the licenses. But for small master's level courses, which is what my teaching is based in, this is ideal. So essentially, they're just like PowerPoint slides, but they're interactive. They don't need the keypads that you have to book out from IS and then book back in and panic when there's only 24 when you had 25 come out. They all use their phones or tablets or laptops, basically anything with an internet connection. I surveyed my students at the start of the class, and they all said they were happy to use their own devices, and most of them worked very well. They liked the Nearpod ones, and then we were able to use the rest of the time for these application-based, problem-based exercises, which hopefully, I haven't marked their exam papers yet, but I'm hoping that that's increased their understanding. The students liked it, as you can see. All of them said that they either strongly agreed or agreed that Nearpod had helped their learning and that they'd like to use this in other modules. So that always goes down well. The student opinions, let's have another Spice Girls reference. They're always very quick to tell you what they want, what they really, really want, or more often what they don't like or don't want. But actually all of this has gone down really well. The top comment came from the students, the distance learning students, when we were surveying them to ask about the use of iPads. So they've identified that a lot of their free time at work or when travelling could be used more efficiently, which is why we need to package these in small bite-sized chunks. This is just a summary of some of the comments that I got from the evaluation of Nearpod with our campus-based students. So you can see they're identifying it's interactive, it's useful, they're learning, it's helping them, they're questioning things. So hopefully all the things that I wanted to get out of those sessions. And I think for all students, particularly when we're considering inclusivity, so we have a lot of students on our campus-based course for whom English is not their first language, and the ability to be able to replay these podcasts, revisit the slides, rather than just hearing it once at the front of a lecture theatre and missing it, they really, really find that useful both for their learning and for their revision. So my conclusions and future directions, certainly any kind of this media-enhanced learning, the lecture capture, any of the videos, I really do believe is effective, and certainly our distance courses have had huge benefits for our campus-based teaching, but it does take time. So anybody that tells you that distance learning is the easy option, please don't let them be in the same room if they say that around me, because they'll get seriously put in their place. I have had academic colleagues tell me that, which didn't go down too well. One of the disadvantages, and I think one of the reasons colleagues don't like doing it, is that the recorded material really is scrutinised. And if you've got very questioning students, they are very quick to come back and point out where you've said something that perhaps doesn't make sense. And I'm sure we all do it when standing in front of the lecture theatre, and you just sort of say things, and like Andrew, maybe I'll come back and look at this tomorrow and realise that I was talking rubbish for all of my 20 minutes. So you do have to be careful, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that keeps us on our toes and it makes sure that we're delivering high quality teaching material. The interactivity in class does take longer, so you do need to think about the material that's being delivered in those timetabled sessions. Interaction with students will take up more time than just standing there talking at them. My future directions, I'd love to get some more introductions done for each module on the distance learning course and perhaps for our campus-based courses as well. I've got a list of different software that I want to try. Every time I go to one of these talks, I come away with a list as long as this of, oh, that sounds exciting, I'll go and try that. But it's not just about the new technology, it's about seeing where that gap is and seeing how that can help us, as Wynne mentioned. And as I said, I'd love to get the students using something like Touchcast to make their own recordings, to deliver material, maybe even in assessments. I just have to convince other colleagues that that's a good idea. Thank you very much for listening. I've had my red card, so I know my time's nearly up. If anybody's got questions, I'm sure there'll be chance over the day to do it rather than now. I do have a short teaching poster outside that has all these contact details on as well, so if you don't get a chance to take a picture now, then take a picture of the poster, and I'd be pleased to hear from anybody.
Thanks, Sally. That was the perfect start for today. A really good connection between what MELSIG's interested in, and Sally's been to MELSIG events before. That connection between video and where we're going technically with smart devices. But I'm going to move swiftly over because Sally's just spoken fairly quickly and help us to catch up.